IVM.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Simblified. And this time we are without two of our main funny men. So poor hapless Simplified listeners are going to have to do with you and me, Tony.
Yeah, and we don't even have a special guest this time, so
Yeah.
this is good.
So, but we've got a good topic to discuss, so hopefully that will make up. And we'll pitch right into it. But
Yeah, tell us what vertical have you picked the topic from this time?
Yeah. So I've been vertically challenged for a long time. So when I had an arranged marriage, right? So my the protocol is that the girls' side, that's what used to happen in our community. The girls' side will ask for your biodata, right? And my mom, in the biodata, she gave out a biodata, and she mentioned that I was 5 feet 10.5 inches tall, and actually I am 5 feet 9 inches tall. So Sheila, to this day, we've been married for 28 years now, and she still tells me that she's been cheated. She entered the marriage expecting someone 5 feet 10.5, and she got someone just a mere 5 feet 9 inches.
But I also exaggerate by 1.5 inches. But okay, sorry, let's not. Actually, I think our listeners can read more about this in Naren's new book, which is called Long Story Short.
That would be actually a nice name.
Yeah, every time you come on, we are going to keep pressuring you, Naren, until you finally write that book. Or many, why not?
I've got a whole bunch of anecdotes that I've got. So it's just going to be a string of anecdotes, most of them pointless, most of them. But that's what life is actually. In hindsight, after seeing all this COVID-19 business, it's mostly pointless, and there's no use pretending otherwise. So we shall make light of the situation and talk about something completely irrelevant, such as vertical farming. And so vertically challenged guy talks about vertical farming could be the tagline for this episode, I think. Anyway, so when all this lockdown thing was happening, one of my daily chores was to go and almost forage for vegetables. So vegetables were difficult to come by in our locality. So you had to go around, and for some inexplicable reason, the authorities were particularly hard on the vegetable vendors. So they'd keep chasing them from place to place. So guys would sit in a regular place. You would find them there, and then you go there, and then you sort of look around, and then you find that guy is sort of desperately waving somewhere. I'm sitting here now. You go there, and then you ask him what happened. He said, "Nee, municipality ka gaadi aa raha hai." So,
this despite him pulling up his t-shirt to make it into a mask.
Yeah. And they're absolutely clueless, right? So they had no idea in the initial. Then later they figured out. And later I think the police also became a little more sympathetic. They took. So one day I was standing at a vegetable guy's place, and there was a whole bunch of people crowding around.
Yeah.
And a policeman came, and he actually explained, he told all of us that, this is what happened. And he was very nice about it. He wasn't rude. He wasn't aggressive. He just very sort of matter-of-factly said that, you really don't want to get COVID. You're dead if you get it.
That's very
come
nice.
back. Yeah, so he really said that. And he went away, and that was far more effective than any sort of harsh bluster or whatever. Just
Unlike now, our resident welfare association uncles who suddenly found power,
Yeah,
who are like, okay, this feels nice to police. But I
yeah.
guess all important.
So I'm there. We have several of them. I mean, in the neighborhood, and it's great source of entertainment. So there'll be some uncles who want to basically have a Stalinist regime, and then there'll be a few, sort of left wing, right wing, or whatever, of freedom, voice for freedom kind of guys. And yeah, so there's one building just down the road where there are frequent vocal arguments, and
Wow.
it's great entertainment. So if you don't have anything to do, you hang around there, and sooner or later, some young whippersnapper will be shouting at some uncle, and will be shouting.
But
Also,
the intersection of Residents Welfare Association and right wing affiliates is
yeah,
RWA and RWA. It's like a very nice.
if you draw a Venn diagram, then you will
Yeah.
like almost complete overlap.
But you were talking about vegetables and
Yeah, so because of this vegetable situation, I really, I was reading, and for some reason, I came upon this concept called vertical farming, which I thought was very interesting.
how
So
nice.
basically, what they do in vertical farming is, as the name implies, they grow things vertically. They use the vertical space, and they say that you can grow. So, like if let's say you have a space in your building, compound, which is 500 square feet, and that's free space, and you really couldn't grow anything on 500 square feet. But if you build, and your building is probably 7 stories high, so if you plant plants stacked up one on top of the other for 7 stories, you could really have 7 times 500, that is 3,500 square feet, and that would be a lot. So you could probably grow enough vegetables for at least half the building.
Ah, okay. So this is
But
not vertical farming. Doesn't mean you grow it on your terrace, which is also
yeah, you can also grow it on your terrace, but it's basically utilizing the Z dimension, basically. So
okay.
yeah.
And there are no floor space index restrictions for vertical farming, I'm guessing.
So the restrictions are very hazy. No one's really tried it in India. This is a concept that's been tried in the US. It started in the US. So the a modern concept was proposed in as early as 1999. So not very old, by a gentleman named Dixon Despomier. So Dixon Despomier is a professor of public and environmental health at Columbia University in New York, and he's an interesting guy. So he's done work on sort of they're called ecotones. So ecotones are zones which you have a water body and you have a land body, and the interface you usually find a little bit of marshy space. You'll find grass growing, reeds growing, something like that. And what happens is the reeds, they collect a lot of rotting vegetation, and that after a period of time becomes nutritious enough for trees to grow. So you find if there is a lake and a landmass and there's a bank of reeds going alongside the shore, over a period of time, you'll find the shore encroaching onto the lake.
Ah, okay.
And
Not
sometimes it
because of
works.
real estate guys.
Yeah, not because this is nature. This is how, and there are factors. So human occupation is a big factor. So when humans come, they come with a lot of it. So they have garbage. They have different patterns of use. They put effluents into the water bodies. They do a lot of things. So this guy was studying all those kind of things. So he wasn't really into anything other than that. And then he took this class, and just as a project, he decided to ask people to design a 30-story building which would just be agriculture. So his concept was you have plants on the top, and as you grow lower, the waste of the plant growing thing would feed chickens and birds and fish and things like that. And then, that whole thing,
Right.
envisaged that as a self-contained sort of unit.
How nice.
And it was, it was interesting. And he came on Colbert some 7 years later.
Wow.
And then that really got everyone's imagination growing, and people thought you could grow vegetables in the windowsill and things like that.
Yeah, but only someone from either Mumbai or New York could have felt the desperate need to do this.
And absolutely, as we go later on into the podcast, we'll find out that it's not all as practical as the advocates make it out to be. So, first, I'll just go on to describe what vertical farming is, just to give an idea of what people do. So basically, there are three ways of the thing about vertical farming is you don't use soil. Okay, and the reason you don't use soil is you need a lot of soil in order to grow plants. Soil is not very efficient. And usually that's not a problem because you have a lot of land. So land is really not scarce at all.
Right.
So, you just grow plants and you have large farms and people grow. But if you don't use soil, if you just use some inert medium to hold the plants together and you feed the plants whatever nutrients the plants want, the plant will do what it does best, that is photosynthesis. And you'll be able to fine-tune the output. So you'll really be able to maximize the growth and whatever you want out of the plant.
Right. This is sort of like how orchids are grown, or is that completely different?
Yeah, I think orchids are basically epiphytes. So anyway, epiphytes are plants that grow on other plants, but without being parasitic in nature. So basically, they have roots dangling in the air and everything like that. So orchids are anyway nature's vertical farms. But you can grow anything vertically. So for example,
basically, if you add substance, they'll give you a soiler alert. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So it started off with hydroponics. So hydroponics is pretty old. It was invented sometime in the 20s or the early 30s by a guy in UC Berkeley, and he demonstrated it. So he came to the conclusion that all that plants want are he identified some 16 nutrients, and he figured that those were the only nutrients the plants wanted. And out of those 16, 3 of them, that is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, are available in water and air. So there are 13 which are required. And basically these are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, and a bunch of other trace ones. Calcium, there is boron, there is manganese, there is a bunch of other small iron is there, chlorine is there. And curiously, one total odd man out is one element, molybdenum, which the only other instance I have found is in stainless steel. In some kinds of stainless steel, you use molybdenum. It imparts chemical resistance to So all these, he figured out a cocktail of these nutrients. He figured that you would have to make them water soluble so that the roots could absorb them. And if you the only other thing that the plant needs is sunlight. So if it got sunlight and it got all its nutrients, it would perform. And perform means it would show growth and it would produce fruits or flowers or whatever it was that you were interested in.
Right. So these are just basically uncomplicated plants with no emotional baggage. They'll just do their own thing.
Yeah. That was how it started, and then all these guys started optimizing it um, for various different plants. So if you want to grow strawberries, it needs a different amount of light. It needs a different amount of different kind of temperature, different humidity from, let us say, lettuce or maybe ladyfinger. So scientists got to work, and they they put everything together, and soon there were hydroponic farms. And there are places like Israel, the desert of Israel is one, where it makes sense. So Israel is generally, it's in its strategic interest to be self-sufficient food-wise, because it's got a lot of hostile neighbors. So they, they developed it into a fine art, and uh, the technology is really spread all over the world. The only problem is it's quite expensive. So, and if you sort of measure it up uh, against other other, like, basically land-based farming systems in
Right.
countries where labor and land is not very expensive, it just doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
But people still kept at it, and they optimized it further. So then they realized that there wasn't enough sunlight all the time. So if you have a vertical farm, you won't have enough sunlight to uh, you know like your south side of the whatever, it'll be, the sunlight will be available for only a part of the day. So you won't get enough sunlight for enough photosynthesis to happen. So then by this time, LED lights were available. This is like late 1990s, early 2000s. LED started becoming more and more common.
Ah.
And then,
Is this how, like, was cultivating marijuana in labs? How
actually,
they?
yeah, so marijuana cultivation is a major use case of hydroponics application.
Sorry if I jumped the gun.
No, it is. Actually, it's it's a very good because you can do it very quietly in the
Yeah.
privacy of your bedroom.
Yeah.
You don't need sunlight.
We are not advocating that, of course, but
Yeah.
but
And
there's a very interesting fact
mm,
about this. I'll have to check my sources again, but basically, the thing was apparently marijuana farming in labs
mm.
takes up about 1% of the total electricity in the US, because these are very high energy lights. So the contradiction was, like, this energy intensive thing is going to be a double whammy, right? Like, it's very ironic that something that promotes peace is actually sucking up so many resources. So
Mm.
you get a very ironic high when you smoke lab cultivated marijuana.
Mm. So yeah, little ironies that make life so interesting. Yeah. So, but yeah, so that became. I think that was you would have the maximum number of hydroponics experts in the US, at least, would be guys who started off growing pot. But there are people who, after people smoked up and sobered down, they realized that they probably could extend the principle to other crops as well. And then there have been a number of uh, vertical farms and private. Oh, before that, I have to tell you about two other interesting techniques of growing of vertical farming. So one is called aquaponics. So aquaponics comes from aquaculture and hydroponics, and what they do is they grow it entirely in water, and the downstream of the water is a fish tank. So fish sort of they take the nutrient, the water is purified by the plants, it goes into the fish tank. The fish, they live in the water, they eat, and they contribute a lot of their poo into the water, and they clean all this. They clean all the solid matter, and for some reason, water in which fish are living tends to get rich in ammonia. So there's a process by which you can convert it to nitrate ammonia, and that is used by the plants. And so the cycle is such that it's almost there's nothing wasted in that. So the fish produce the nutrients for the plants. The plants take up all the nutrients. They they clean up the water and give it back to the fish. And in theory, this is great, but in practice, the system is too delicate because you have too many living creatures dependent on each other. And if any one of them dies, so if the fish die, the plants start dying too, and the plants die.
Okay.
So it's too difficult to manage. So that's why it really hasn't caught up.
It's the coalition government of the world.
Of the biological world, yeah. And the other one is something called aeroponics. And aeroponics is this hydroponics thing, except that instead of immersing the roots in water, which is what they do in hydroponics, they just sort of mist it with nutrient-rich mist aerosols. So it uses much less water than hydroponics does. So if hydroponics uses 100 liters, this would use probably 1 liter. But the downside, again, it's very delicate, and you forget to sort of, look after your plants for one day and they're all dead. So,
oh God, okay.
Vertical farming uses any or all of these techniques. So that is the promise of the vertical farm, that you can grow a lot of crops in a small space very efficiently.
Right.
And
you've managed to do it successfully, right?
Yeah, if you manage. So so people have done very interesting things. So there is this startup called Local Roots. Okay, so Local Roots in the US, it launched a system called the Terra Farm, which is a vertical farming system hosted in a 40-foot shipping container. So this is really fancy, and because it's a startup, it has the works, right? So it has computer vision integrated with artificial neural network to monitor the plant. So basically, you have AI and you have computer vision, you have machine learning, and the works. And the whole objective is to achieve cost parity with traditional outdoor farming. And this startup claims to have done that. So it claims that if you invest in one of their containers, you would grow lettuce for roughly as much as you would if you're growing them on an open plot of land.
Wow. And you're not dependent on the elements.
Yeah. So one 40-foot container, according to them, can produce the equivalent of 5 acres of farmland and use only 3% of the water.
That sounds promising.
Yeah, so they'll recapture the water. They'll the evaporated water. They'll recondense it through the air conditioning, all kinds of things. And there are they got a lot of publicity back in the day, and now you don't hear about them that much. So it's probably not that straightforward.
Or they made all the money they wanted to, and they've retired peacefully and are now doing some change from local roots to grassroots, if you know what I mean.
Actually, that's it's more VC farming than vertical farming. So and took the money and. So basically, the advantages, of course, are agricultural efficiency. So in a smaller, so this in a 40-foot container, if you can grow 3 to 5 acres worth of produce, that's a lot of efficiency there. So most people accept that vertical farming is at least 10x more efficient than open farming, land farming. And second advantage is resistance to weather. So most vertical farms are completely climate controlled, because when plants don't have the soil to lean on, they have to, everything needs to be controlled for them. So humidity, carbon dioxide level. So there's an interesting thing is they actually pump in carbon dioxide to increase the yield of the plant.
Wow.
Because,
Okay.
as everyone knows that plants take in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. So if you have a closed space and you just leave a bunch of plants in it, the oxygen levels will go up and the plant productivity will come down. So we actually have to pump in carbon dioxide.
The opposite of casinos, where they actually pump in
oxygen to keep people
keep people going. But this also means that it's quite intensive, that you need to take care of it constantly, and it needs constant monitoring, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So it is very, it's very capable of being automated. So they have sensors for everything. So they have humidity sensors, they have sensors for pH. They have, so when you provide a plant with water filled with nutrients, you want to make sure that there are enough nutrients in it. So there are sensors available which will test the electrical conductivity of the water, and from that electrical conductivity, because it knows the electrical conductivity of the nutrients, it will sort of deduce what proportion of nutrient is in the water, and it will alert the farmer to add more nutrients because the system thinks that now it doesn't have enough nutrients, that kind of thing. So the farmer basically has to just go home and watch Netflix, and just he gets an alert on his phone, he has to come and pop it up. And apparently it happens once in a week or once in 10 days. It's not even like every day. So,
this is the famous thing called Internet of Things. Sorry, go on.
So that is, that the other thing is traditional farming is often prey to weeds and pests, rodents, birds, that kind of thing. So all that is not there because you're doing that in controlled circumstances. So nothing can.
If there is weed here, it is purely intentional.
Yeah. The weed is grown. Yeah. And,
but you've managed to basically produce some lovely vegetables and some nice chilies and habaneros. During a pandemic, I think this is what they refer to as habanero was fiddling when Rome burned.
Yeah. For those of you who mightn't know what Tony is referring to, I planted. I had some. I found some seeds of habanero chilies. I planted them at home during this COVID lockdown, and they did very well. So we got 4 plants, and we harvested nearly 40 or 50 habanero chilies. And these chilies are really, really, really spicy. So so now my son is making some kind of a sauce out of it. And I had part of the recipe is 14 days of fermentation. So that's the stage going on. But I ate a little bit of that, and it set my tongue on fire. It was really
really. There on the Scoville scale, there are some 100,000 to 350,000 SH.
Yeah, something like that. Which is, I think, 10x more than the normal spicy green chili that you get, which is some 10,000 or something.
Correct.
10, 20, 30x.
But they look as colorful as capsicum, which is basically just an imposter of a chili, right? This is the opposite. So,
capsicum is like, it's what should be it's like these national leaders who wear this fake khadi, right? So Mahatma Gandhi used to actually wear khadi because khadi is a pretty difficult fabric to wear. It offers you no protection from the elements.
Yeah, capsicum is like the homeo version of a chili, right? It's so diluted, but supposedly effective.
Homeo chili, 200x diluted. but the plants look remarkably identical. So we have capsicum plants and we have this habanero chili plant.
Oh, you wouldn't want to mix those two up.
You have a job. I mean, a layperson, my mom can tell, but I can't at first glance. I can't. I don't know.
Wow.
You can tell from the fruit, but not from the plant itself. So, so those are the advantages. The other advantage is that you can grow virtually anything, anytime you like. So in normal farming, you have seasons for everything. So you have seasons for grapes, you have seasons for strawberries, for example. And you could grow your strawberries like in the middle of the monsoon if you wanted.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's touted as a big advantage of.
Yeah. To hell with seasons. It's whatever we want it to be. To hell with seasons. It's whatever we want it to be. So those were the advantages of vertical farming. We'll look at the other side on the other side of the break.
Stay tuned.
Hey everybody, welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. It really has been a great week this week. We've had two of our first international cricketers show up, people who have played for their respective sides. We had W.V. Raman come on Edges and Sledges, the cricket podcast. If you haven't heard that, you should be listening to that if you enjoy cricket. It's really one of the best out there. And you should also definitely check out Monty Pandithar, who showed up on Cyrus Says. That was another really interesting conversation that occurred. If you haven't been listening to a few of our shorter shows, please do that as well. Ashish Vidyarthi has been doing a great job for us. We got 30 episodes now on Begin the Journey. I think you really enjoyed that show. If you haven't listened to it, it helps you with understanding what's going on in this tough time and how to deal with it from a mental health perspective. We've also had some really fun stuff come up on the Smile India show. Shifa's been doing a lot of really good stories over there. Things would just make you happy, so definitely do check that out. And on the more serious side, make sure that you're checking out our regular shows like the Pragati podcast, All Things Policy. They're definitely going to keep you up to date on what's going on in this COVID world. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
Welcome back to Simplified. We are with Naren, who claims to be vertically challenged, but not so in vertical farming. Naren, tell us, what are the problems related with vertical farming?
We were just hearing about the advantages of vertical farming, and it was like the best thing since sliced cheese. And then it turns out that it's not all that great, right? So there are naysayers for everything, and there are a bunch of people who think that vertical farming is simply too overhyped and is really not a solution for any major economic situation. So vertical farming is okay for very specific use cases, but in general, they feel that the economics is very against vertical farming. So in normal farming, land is pretty cheap, right? So most farming land is under a couple of lakhs an acre. Like, I'm not talking about land around cities and towns.
Yeah.
Farming land is not really very expensive, and so if you had a 100-acre farm, maybe you had to start it from scratch. The whole thing wouldn't cost you more than a couple of crores. And so someone I was speaking to who knows this thing, he said for a couple of crores, you wouldn't be able to put up even a half an acre hydroponic farm.
Oh, okay.
Because there's a lot of equipment, right? So everything is piped in, all the liquid. You need these pumps, you need a lot of sensors, you need to calibrate everything. So they're not it's not simple. So you need a lot of engineering to go into. You need to control humidity, you need to have fans, you need to have AC. So it's pretty expensive. And the yield of half an acre, even if you assume it's 10x or 20x more, it can't be comparable to a 100-acre farm. So the capital cost is just going to make it unviable. So There are
Okay.
studies which, so usually in very high cost economies where labor is very expensive or something like that, there might be some advantage because there's a smaller area if you need fewer people to work on the farm.
Yeah.
But in general, it is at least vertical farms are at least 10 times more expensive than conventional farms. So that is one of the big disadvantages. So there's this guy named Louis Albright, who was a professor of biological and environmental engineering at Cornell. And he calculated that a loaf of bread made from wheat grown in a vertical farm would cost 27 US dollars. And the average cost of a loaf of bread at that time was $1.296. Yeah, so it's a lot of.
But it probably works for, some specialized things, right? Like kiwi fruit. Again, like another fact about kiwi fruit is that I think when it goes to the US, it costs more for the airline fuel to carry one kiwi fruit than the fruit itself. Like it's grown only in very specific areas. Can you grow anything you want in a vertical farm? Or
So pretty much, I'm sure you could grow kiwi fruit. I haven't really come across any, but I've come across sort of YouTube videos that talk about growing strawberries in Bombay. I'm very interested in that. So I'm planning to build a small hydroponic system in my house, and if I ever get around to doing that, I'll put up a little link on Simplified, and I'll.
Oh, nice.
But so I thought that was very cool. So I've got a few strawberry plants from Mahabaleshwar when we went there last a few months ago. And they actually grew here, and we got strawberries.
Wow.
So we got strawberries in April in Bombay, but not really very many at all. So we had a grand total of, I think, 6 strawberries. So all these 3 tiny, scrawny little plants. And now they're still alive, but they aren't. They aren't growing any strawberries. The season is over, so it's not strawberry season anymore.
Oh.
But those 6 that grew were pretty nice. I mean, they were a little sour, but they were nice. They had the strawberry smell. They had strawberry taste. It was nice.
Great. We got a bougainvillea from, I think, Panchgani or Alibag or somewhere, and even that doesn't grow here. So clearly we're doing something wrong.
No, bougainvillea needs a lot of sunlight. It needs a lot of sunlight.
Okay.
So if you don't get sunlight, you'll have. So we have bougainvilleas on our terrace, and they are resplendent. They're beautiful. So on the terrace, they get a lot of sunlight. On a windowsill, if you get very limited sunlight, so only a few hours a day. So probably that's not enough for that plant.
Yeah.
So that is one of the disadvantages of thing. But as you said, growing wheat is not the right use case for vertical farming. It's probably something more exotic. Yeah, kiwi fruit, strawberries, grapes, perhaps, and out of season grapes. So grapes are very seasonal. So how lovely it would be to have fresh grapes in June.
Yeah, correct.
That would be a good use case for a vertical garden. And the second disadvantage is energy use. Right? So during the growing season, the sun shines, on a, like, suppose you were vertical farming on one side of your building. For one season, it would be perfect. So whatever time of the year, the angle of the sun would be just right, and you'd have a great crop in that few months. But the sun keeps moving around, and then the rest of the year, that would be the shadow side of the sun, and your building, that phase of your building won't get any sun, and that means that you would have to then shine lights on it, and which is what commercial growers do. So they put LED lights, and They use electrical power, and then they use that. And they calculate that you use about 4x to 6x more power to grow under artificial light than natural light.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the vertical farming guys' answer to that is, but we use renewable energy. So what they're doing is they're putting solar panels on top
Right.
to capture the sunlight, to give the light which the sunlight can't give. So it's very paradoxical. So,
Yeah.
economists say that this is foolishness. So you have, first of all, a lot of solar panels, and you're capturing sun, and then you're piping it back to the plant. When, if you didn't have all this nonsense, you would just grow it on a plot of land, and all that would be available.
Yeah. So I just looked up the pot fact that I mentioned. In California, apparently, where it's grown, it takes up as much as 3% of the energy of the entire state. Just the LED lights. So yeah, it can be pretty energy intensive.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure they can be energy neutral given the small space, right? There is a physical limit to how many solar panels you can place, and
Yes.
getting to energy neutrality might take way more than
And
what they
even solar panels, they are not they come with a negative carbon footprint, so they cost a lot of energy to make, the solar panels, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so that, if you account all that, green energy is not all that green, is what the advocates of non-green energy keep saying. Yeah. So they feel, they calculate that in northern United States, it can be over $200,000 per hectare. It's a hell of a lot.
Oh wow. Okay.
Fuel cost. And the third thing is pollution. So that is, most commercial farms, in order to increase yields, try to increase the proportion of carbon dioxide inside the farm, inside the vertical farm. And they do that by burning hydrocarbons, by burning fuel, by burning mostly fuel oil. So not all of it is used by the plant, and then they have to keep venting it. And they feel that the carbon footprint of lettuce is 4 times more than lettuce grown in open.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the lettuce iceberg. Iceberg.
Iceberg.
I got that wrong. I hope that remains in the podcast and is not edited.
Let's leave it at that. So they add a lot of other things like sulfur dioxide and ethylene. Burning is never pure. So if you burn, let us say, diesel, you're not going to get just carbon dioxide. You're also going to get sulfur dioxide. You're also going to get ethylene, and all these things are harmful to the atmosphere. So that is the anti-vertical farming lobby's argument.
Right.
So on the whole, it's pretty clear that it is great for growing marijuana. Anything else, which of course is it's a noble sort of endeavor, and though we don't support that particular activity, one can understand why people would do it. But the only other advantage I can see, and the one that I'm interested in, is growing things out of season and growing them in your house. So we grow a lot of things on our terrace garden. So among other things, we grow lemons, right? So they taste the same as the lemons you buy in the market.
This is the inverse of that. When life doesn't give you lemons, vertical farming.
Yeah. But yeah, it's so satisfying. I mean, you have one lemon and like there's a lot of excitement and you make limbu sharbat out of it. The bloody lemon costs 5 rupees in the market.
Yeah.
It really doesn't make sense growing lemons on a terrace.
This reminds me of the time when we were cousins and we went to Munnar once and found one passion fruit. And we made juice out of it, and it tasted really horrible. But it's a memory that still remains because you found it in the wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's about it from me. And,
that's a very nice thing to find out about how to turn over a new leaf, quite literally.
Yeah, it's part of our growing up.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Naren.
Yeah. So, yes, stay tuned, stay farmed, and stay simplified.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi guys, this is Ayushi.
And I am Ritasha.
And welcome to Agla Station Adulthood.
It's a fun podcast we've got going on, and we'd love for you to tune in and enjoy with us.
Join us as we stop at various stations and discuss different topics that seem to be bothering us and hopefully
Dating,
you as well.
relationships, beauty, just being an adult, lots of different things.
We don't have a great grip on it, but we've done okay so far.
Catch Agla Station Adulthood every Thursday on the IVM app, the IVM website, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.